Bledsoe was arrested.
Patrick Montgomery was in court.
Jonathan Manapa will stay in federal custody.
No, I don't take responsibility at all.
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. So 30-year-old Tennessee resident Ronald McAbee was a sheriff's deputy when he violently assaulted officers on January 6th. So McAbee was out on medical leave at the time. It was due to a shoulder injury. He planned for the violence, too. In a message to a friend, McAbee said, quote, "I'll slap a commie with this dead arm." And then McAbee's friend responded with a picture of a knife and brass knuckles, and he wrote, quote, "That's what I'll carry in my pocket." And then McAbee asked where he could get some of the knuckles, and his friend recommended Amazon. And then McAbee suggested that his, quote, "tire puncture is a great tool." And then he also asked his friend to order a pair of steel reinforced brass knuckle gloves for him. So on January 6th, McAbee was wearing a bulletproof vest. It said sheriff on the chest, so wasn't hard to figure out he was with the police. He was wearing the brass knuckle gloves that his friend purchased for him. And after watching and filming other people attacking the police, McAbee maneuvered to the front of the mob. This was just outside of the Lower West Terrace Tunnel, and he joined in the attack. So while several of his co-defendants, these weren't people he knew, but they ended up becoming his co-defendants, while they were beating on police and they knocked a couple of officers down, McAbee jumped in. He pushed an officer named Carter Moore. That officer was attempting to assist another downed officer. So McAbee pushed him. Then McAbee was seen grabbing the leg of another downed officer, and he started dragging him away from the police line. So two other officers tried to help this downed officer, and McAbee started screaming and cursing at one of them, and then he struck that officer with his hands. He hit that officer 2 times in the face with his hands. McAbee then turned to the second officer who's trying to help. He grabbed that officer's torso and lifted him off the ground. And according to the prosecutor, the officer was heard on his body cam screaming out in pain. Now, during this melee, McAbee, at some point, he slipped and he fell on top of a downed officer. And then the two of them slid down a flight of stairs. So the officer was pinned under McAbee, and he's a pretty big boy. And so the officer was trying to push McAbee off. And so they're struggling, kind of fighting with each other on the ground. And other members of the mob, while this officer has this big guy on top of him trying to get him off, other people in the mob are hitting the officer with various objects. They ripped off his gas mask, and then they sprayed him directly in the face with chemicals. So sometime later, McAbee joined him with the others in the crowd, and he was trying to render CPR to Roseanne Boyland. And then McAbee and others carried her to the mouth of the tunnel, and they handed her off to the officers, who also tried to revive her. Sadly, as we all know, Roseanne Boyland passed away that day. Now, following the Capitol attack, McAbee was boasting about his crimes. He was happy about it. He sent a photo of an injury that he sustained on January 6th to a friend, and he wrote, quote, "I've shed blood for my country by the hands of the swamp. I will shed much more in the days to come, but I will not forget the oath I swore years ago to protect the America I once knew. Liberty or death." They're all so dramatic. So on January 8th, McAbee denied that anyone in the crowd used weapons or chemicals against the police. He is a disgrace to all police officers. So McAbee was arrested on August 17th of 2021, and in a superseding indictment, he was charged with 2 counts of assaulting officers, civil disorder, entering a restricted building or grounds, disorderly conduct in a restricted building or grounds, and 2 counts of physical violence. In September of 2023, McAbee pleaded guilty to 1 count of assaulting officers and also physical violence on Capitol grounds. However, He did that without a formal plea agreement. And so his case went to trial in October of 2023. And the jury ultimately found McAbee guilty on all counts. And so based on the assault with the bodily injury conviction, McAbee was looking at up to 8 years in prison, 3 years of probation, and $250,000 in fines. And this time, the government requested even more time behind bars. They asked for 151 months in prison, so just over 12 and a half years. Also, 3 years of probation, and they asked for $32,165.65 in restitution. And I'll explain why in a minute, but the prosecutor argued that McAbee's brass knuckle gloves should be considered a deadly or dangerous weapon, and so McAbee should receive sentencing enhancements for restraining the officer that he landed on, also the weapon. They also noted that since McAbee has been incarcerated, he's had another altercation with officers in the jail. Evidently, McAbee refused orders to return to his cell. They told him to go to your cell, put on your mask. He pushed past an officer. He made physical contact with her. So McAbee was sprayed with chemicals, and then he started screaming and cursing at the officer. Then another officer tried to step in and restrain McAbee, and then he got in that officer's face and started screaming. Then a third officer tried to restrain McAbee, and he kicked at that third officer. So at McAbee's sentencing hearing, he apologized to the police and he said, quote, "I wish they were here so I can tell them I'm sorry." He also said he's sorry for all the families who lost a loved one on January 6th, including, he said, the officers who died as a result of their injuries or those who took their own lives. So U.S. District Judge Rudolph Contreras presided over McAbee's case, and he told McAbee, quote, "It was an aggravated assault in every sense. You lost your cool that day. I take attacks on law enforcement very, very seriously, as I suspect you did too before that day." In the end, McAbee was sentenced to 70 months in prison, 3 years of probation, and $32,165 in restitution. So over $30,000 of that covered the medical costs associated with one of the officer's medical treatments. And then it reimburses the police department for the time off for that officer because of his duty, because of his injuries. And I should note, McAbee will receive credit because he's already spent 30 months in jail. So basically he has about 3 more years to go. So I'm sure not a fun place to be for a cop, but yeah, and he's in there attacking more cops. So are we to believe that he really cares about the people that he attacked at the Capitol? I think not. Anyway, I will let you all know when I hear more. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Please like this video, share it, become a subscriber if you have not, become a donor if you possibly can. Love you all. Take care. Talk with you soon.